For my debut novel, I purposefully wrote an unlikable, morally gray character, and here's why. Hi, hello, how are you? I hope you're having a wonderful day. If you are new here, welcome. My name is Maddie Bloom, and I'm a multi-genre author, primarily focusing on sci-fi and fantasy. And if you are not new here, then welcome back. Thank you so much for returning. It means the world to me. As my title suggests, I wanted to talk today about why I chose to purposefully write an unlikable character for my novel. If you are new here or you don't know what my book is about, back in September, I released This Cruel Fate, an adult dystopian fantasy that asks the question, what happens to that plucky young hero that is a bit of a chosen one? They had the world on their shoulders in their teen years. What happens after the war when they are grown up? So in This Cruel Fate, we meet Zolia, a woman in her 20s who is 7 years post saving the world. Her life went from one of incredible importance and adrenaline to very just mundane anonymity, and routine, and her actions don't have any direct influence on the wider world around her. When an old flame shows her a path that allows her to relive an echo of those glory days, she finds herself on this slippery slope between doing what is right and doing what feels right. When I first started writing this book, I always knew it was going to be a character corruption arc. I was so inspired by the amazing and expansive franchises that I had read in my youth. So I loved The Hunger Games, I loved the Percy Jackson series, and of course there were a myriad of other series that focused on a young person, often a preteen to teenager, that was thrust into greatness, and they were given a lot of power and importance in those really young and impressionable years. And then the battle is over, of course, by the time they're like 18, because that's just the nature of the middle grade and YA genre conventions. They need to be done by the time they're an adult. And I watched an SNL sketch with Daniel Radcliffe. I do not like Harry Potter, and I was an OG hater. Like, I hated it before all the stuff about J.K. Rowling came out, about what a horrible person she is. So, yeah, I do not like the series. But I saw this SNL sketch years ago with Daniel Radcliffe, where he, of course, reprised the titular role of Harry Potter. But he went to Hogwarts, and he was just stuck on this idea of being Harry Potter, and everyone else around him had moved on and was okay with their like boring adult life, and he just wasn't. And in that one, he was like a loser. But that really stuck with me as someone who had loved these stories, and it planted that seed in my head of like, what does giving a young person that much power due to their psyche and how they interact with the people around them? And how does that carry on into adulthood, especially when they are no longer having that same title or that same importance and power? So I always knew from the get-go that I wanted to do a character corruption arc. I was really afraid of how the book would be perceived. I was afraid that if I went too far or something, then people would assume that Zolia's beliefs are my beliefs or vice versa, and I did not want that to be the case. So there was a lot of hesitancy. And on top of that, there wasn't a lot of like a wealth of knowledge about writing a character corruption arc online. It is mostly centered around building regular character arcs. So there was a lot of fear. But this is the story that I needed to tell, I wanted to tell, and with this end product, I think I achieved my goals. Of course, I cannot speak to how other people perceive the book, that is up to the reader. But on my end, I am happy and proud of what I was able to accomplish. But since unlikable characters are a bit more niche, I thought I would talk about why I decided to go this route, even knowing that it would be, a harder commercial sell, and knowing having those fears of doing it at all. So that was kind of a long like prelude into the actual why I decided to write an unlikable character. And I say Zoli is unlikable, but I personally love her. I think and I hope that she is compelling for readers. And even if I hope that you see that she's not good and she is on a corruption arc, that you are like engaged and interested and you understand where she's coming from. When I was younger, I loved stories where there is, very clear good and evil. And I feel like that's how a lot of children's media is because you're younger. So you are learning these themes for the first time. A lot of the time, children's media has that moral message because the story is teaching you how to be a good person. And that is especially true of like old timey fairy tales. It's very much like moralizing, which makes sense because we're teaching, and story, even if there isn't like an inherent moral message, it is teaching you. We use story as a form of learning, and that's just thousands of years of humans needing story. But as I've gotten older, I find myself less and less interested in writing stories of people who are like fully good or fully bad, or like exploring good versus evil in this like macro level. I still enjoy a good story, here and there, but I find myself much more drawn to exploring what it means to be human and existing within this state of like not being wholly anything, and maybe you're just trying to be decent, or maybe you're trying to fight off like a desire for power to relive the glory days of when you were younger or you had something and now it's missing. So just for me personally, I'm not saying I'll never write a story where I explore good versus evil, but right now I just am not interested in exploring that at this time on such like a binary macro level. So writing an unlikable character allowed me to really dive into just like common decency, or where we start to pull away from the grain of society or expectation and explore like giving into just like being fully selfish, and things like that, and how that can like drag us away from community. Obviously, being heavily inspired by the chosen one trope, it's something that I loved, and I don't like never want to read it, but I do think that only having one side of the chosen one trope does paint this picture that isn't complete. And with so many of these stories, the chosen one is like so good, but then they're so powerful, but then there's no inherent struggle with what it means to contend with that power that you are given, and you are like somehow able to just be like a regular person that's better than everyone. And I just don't agree with that, especially when we are writing adult literature that allows us the space to explore these themes a lot more in a much more nuanced way. And it's not that I think the future is going to be so bleak as like The Boys or something that really takes this idea of power corrupts, but I do think it's worth exploring how power messes with our perception of ourselves and the people around us, and how I think that we can all be influenced one way or the other, and why it's important to just like check in with yourself and have that critical analysis. Especially, we talk about main character syndrome online, and there's a lot of things that go into that. And I don't have the answers, but I think that when we do have this influx of like chosen one literature that places one character above everyone else, and we don't like critically engage with it, it does kind of create this picture because we want to be that person, or we want to be special, or we want to be respected, loved, whatever. So I just wanted to provide like a different lens looking into it about the importance of like just engaging critically with the media that we consume. And that's kind of a more like deeper level, like on the iceberg of writing the story. But it's something that I felt was important for myself as someone who did just like nom nom nom, all of those stories when I was younger. I also really wanted to write a power hungry female character because I know that there is this desire for like morally gray, but it's so often men, and then they get like, and then they have a female love interest who is like their moral backbone, and that's all fine and good. But I want a woman to have the chance to be evil. Like, I loved The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes and reading about Coriolanus Snow and all of his, like, schemes and plots and his descent into tyranny. And I love the Dune movies, and this, like, the story of Paul Atreides showcasing so clearly that today's revolutionaries are tomorrow's tyrants, which is such a driving force of this cruel fate. But for the life of me, I cannot get past the first 100 pages in Dune, because as an aside, I just hate that Paul Atreides is like this chosen one because he's a man in a woman's space. And I know there's an in-universe reason for that. But at the end of the day, Frank Herbert, a man, is the one who wrote and came up with those decisions. So yeah, I just don't like it. And it's very just like in my face. So for that reason, yeah, I can't read the book. It's so dry and the story is good, but dear God, the prose and Frank Herbert's like blatant homophobia as well, and like the incest done in a homophobic way, it's just, the movies are better in my opinion. And you can fight in the comments, that's fine, but I'm probably not going to read Dune. So I did want a chance to explore like letting a woman be evil and she doesn't have to be the moral backbone for this like broody, morally gray man or whatever. So those are pretty much my reasons for choosing to write an unlikable character for my first novel. And I think if you want to write an unlikable character, then go for it. I want to make a craft video about how I created her corruption arc. I want to make a craft video about how I created her corruption arc, because again, like when I was online, there was not a lot, so I did have to like study the Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes and stuff like that, and I watched like a documentary about dictators just to like, I was just like trying to glean any information I can, and I put a lot of work into making sure that there was a reasoning behind the choices I made, and it's my hope that that is how readers are perceiving the book, but of course, I can't. All I can do is what my intention was, and it's up to the reader to decide if I did it successfully or not, but I will be making a video about how I went into creating that corruption arc, so if you're trying to go off like the beaten path and not do just like the traditional arc, there's a reference for you and a starting point for crafting that character. Anyway, thank you so much for watching. I super appreciate it. If you made it this far, I would love to know your thoughts about any morally gray characters that you've enjoyed, whether or not they're the main character or if they're more like a villain or like tertiary character. If you enjoy writing content and vlogs and things of that nature, that is pretty much what I post, so consider subscribing to my channel if you would like, or give this video a thumbs up. You do not have to though, of course. I just appreciate you being here. Oh, and I did want to share that I am going to be starting co-working streams in April, so if you need some time to set aside to just like sit down and get some work done, whether it's writing or reading or homework, studying, whatever it may be that is like near a computer, I suppose, I'm going to be doing weekly co-working streams so we can knock out projects together and just have like a good time. Then I will be posting to like the community tab my stream schedule, so hang around for that. Otherwise, thank you so much for joining me, and I will see you in the next one.